Here's the next project. This is a Monarch radio. And it's got a couple of shortwave bands, of course AM, and it's got a classic filter hum. Let me turn this thing on. It's not super bad, but it's still very annoying. But notice when I turn up the volume, the noise remains about the same. Put it on a station. Let's see here.
Role model. I don't support him on his tax. I don't support nobody on their tax plan because their tax plan.
Well, let me ask you a question. So you're saying to me you voted for him because he's an African American?
See, that's a classic hum, power hum. So that should be pretty easy. Turn this off. This Monarch radio is very pretty. I don't know what the model number is. I haven't been able to find one, and I haven't been able to find any information on it. But since I'm going to be replacing the capacitors one at a time, we shouldn't have any problems. Here's a look at the back of the radio. And for a while, I thought I was going to have to unsolder and label these leads so I could get the chassis out of the cabinet, but the wires were long enough. Here is one of the bad electrolytic capacitors. At the bottom here you can see that it's isolated from the chassis. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to electrically replace this capacitor, and I'm going to physically leave this alone so it looks the same when I'm done. When you're getting ready to remove the chassis from the cabinet, try to remember to turn in the variable capacitors all the way. That way there's much less chance of them getting damaged when you're removing the chassis. Okay, the chassis has been removed. And here's a look at the underside. And it turns out that there are 3 electrolytic capacitors and 14 paper wax capacitors that I'm going to replace. Here's a look at the 3 electrolytic capacitors that I'm going to change out. 2 of them are in that yellow-orange box, and the other one is the one mounted on the chassis with an insulator to the left. Now all the 17 capacitors have been replaced, and everything was pretty much routine. I had to take more time with some replacements because of where they were at, and some were connected to switches, which is you definitely want to be extremely careful there. But I want to get back to the replacement of the electrolytics. This picture shows the original metal capacitor that's mounted on the chassis. It's a little hard to see here, but what I have done, rather than reroute all those wires, what I did was I cut a 1/4 inch off of that metal tube that is coming out of the original capacitor. So there's a 1/4 inch missing, and after I soldered my leads to the wires from the new capacitors, in other words, the old capacitor is not connected anymore, I used quick set epoxy to make a plastic insulator between the original capacitor and the new connections. Now I have tested the chassis for several hours, and I'm satisfied that everything's fine and the radio's working the way that it should. So with some alligator clips, I added a line dropping resistor previous to this picture. Right now it's mounted on the chassis on the right, upper right, and what that does is it drops the line voltage just a little bit. And of course I test it with alligator clips first before I mount it to make sure that it doesn't overheat, and more importantly that it doesn't degrade the performance of the radio. Here's the diagram of a power transformer for radio, and this is where the resistor was added, and it's just a 8 ohm resistor at 20 watts that I got from Radio Shack, and it lowers the voltage just enough to make things run a little cooler, and I believe that should prolong the life of these radios.
De governo, essa participação é muito importante.
Parabéns, feito um belíssimo trabalho, doutor Luciano Estrada. Tá bem?
Obrigada. Добара и помощи. Държаваме кружаника. С чего мы начали? Поставим какую-то точку в этом вопросе. Я бы хотела еще обратиться к нашим замечательным издателям.
Contractors working for the United Nations have been killed and 15 wounded in a rocket attack.
Finally prevailed upon the father.
El presidente de Ecuador, Rafael Correa, after the Iraqi parliament approved a new security pact with the United States. The victims worked for a catering company contracted by the UN assistance mission for Iraq